Okay, good afternoon and welcome back. I am Piyali Chatterjee from Indian Institute of Astrophysics, and it's my privilege to chair this session. So we have our first speaker is Professor Preeti Kharb, who is a faculty on the National Center for Radio Astrophysics in Pune. She did her PhD from IIA and Bangalore University, and her main research areas are jet formation and propagation in AGNs, multi-wavelength, multi-scale observations of AGN flows, phenomenology of low luminosity, and hybrid morphology AGNs. Besides, she is a member of Astronomical Society of India, and she has been an active member of the working group for gender equity of the ASI. So please welcome Professor Preeti Kharb.
Thank you. Okay. So today I wanted to share a few insights that we've acquired on low luminosity active galactic nuclei in particular, and we have been using this technique of very long baseline interferometry, VLBI, and also radio polarization to study these low luminosity AGN. And I also wanted to discuss a little our insights on the gender equity challenges that we have been involved with over the last decade. So I'll talk a little bit about WGG as well. Okay, so as an introduction, since we haven't had an introduction to active galactic nuclei in this talk, so this is on the left here. This is a cartoon, of course, to show the central engine, so-called central engine, which is also called the active galactic nucleus, which is the center of a galaxy where there resides a supermassive black hole. And the mass of this black hole is usually 1 million to 1 billion solar masses. And matter around this supermassive black hole gets accreted onto this through an accretion disk. And this accretion disk is which produces a lot of luminosity. I mean, it's so bright that it can outshine the stars from the entire galaxy. And also outflows are produced from this as matter falls onto the supermassive black hole. Angular momentum is released through outflows, and which you can see in this cartoon a little bit. So you have some kind of a narrow collimated outflow here, and there's also a broad outflow. So this will become clearer in the rest of the talk about why I actually wanted to highlight this part. So what you see here is, of course, a nice image of one of the famous active galactic nucleus called Hercules A. And this is a multi-waveband image. And then you can see the full grandeur of of what an AGN is. So the host galaxy is just this emission that you see in white. And all the white emission here is emission from emission at optical wavelengths. So you have stellar lights, you have stars, you have stellar lights, you have galaxies, etc. And there is a galaxy here, which is actually has another galaxy falling into it. If you see this point source here, that's another galaxy. And in the center, from the black hole, are these jets are being ejected. And this blue emission that you see is synchrotron emission from this kind of an outflow. And these jets are so large that they leave the host galaxy, which is around here, and go on to hundreds of kiloparsecs to megaparsec scales. Okay, so but the main problem that has been it's a long-standing open question is in the field of AGN is, why do most AGN actually don't look as spectacular as the one that image I showed you? And this is, you can call this the radio loud, radio quiet divide. And so what is the question is that why are only a small fraction of AGN like this, but majority of the AGN are like this? So let me just tell you what these are. So this is an elliptical galaxy. This is a jet, which is shown in red. And the jet, of course, is much, much larger than the galaxy itself. This is a higher resolution image of the same. But most galaxies are like this. So you see a spiral arm in a spiral galaxy, you have star formation, everything. But the radio jet is only this much, the pink emission that you see, it's very small. And so this has actually been quantified by the work of Kale et al., where they found that if you took a ratio of the flux density in the radio to the optical, then most AGN have very low ratios, and only a small fraction of AGN have these high ratios. And so these are called radio loud AGN, and the majority of AGN are radio quiet AGN. Okay, so I have been focusing my attention on radio quiet AGN for the last decade, and want to just mention a few subclasses that constitute the radio quiet AGN class. They're basically made of, or rather they comprise TIFR galaxies. Then there are AGN subclasses known as liners or low ionization nuclear emission line region galaxies, and radio quiet quasars. But all of them, I mean, the main characteristic is that their radio emission is only 10 to 100 parsec in extent, and maybe up to a few kiloparsec at the most. But usually they don't leave the host galaxy itself. They stay within the host galaxy. So the question is why? Why are they not able to leave the host galaxy? Is it because of interaction happening between these jets and some medium? Or are the jets not powerful enough to go far away from the black hole? So these are the questions that we're trying to answer. Okay, so I mentioned already that I want to present work from the technique of very long baseline interferometry as well as polarization, and so I'll just move on to that. I think most astronomers here probably are, I expect that everybody is familiar with the technique of VLBI, but just want to stress that unlike other radio telescopes, which are called connected interferometers, where they are actually different telescopes are connected by optical fibers, VLBI doesn't require that. So you just have to record radio data independently in radio telescopes, which are which could be very far apart from each other. And in fact, space VLBI uses telescopes on Earth and in space to create synthesize an aperture. And the synthesized aperture, because you can change its baseline according to whatever you have, you can also then get arbitrarily high resolutions. And that is also the principle behind the Event Horizon Telescope. I think everybody is familiar with the image, the shadow of the black hole that was captured for our own galaxy and M87, which is a bright AGN, because of this technique of VLBI. Okay, so just that. And so, so I wanted to share a few results which were very interesting, kind of unexpected actually. We started with a small sample of TIFR galaxies, and the initial curiosity about the sample was that they all show emission lines as well. I mean, okay, I didn't explain that. I mentioned the radio jets, but a lot of gas around the black hole also emits emission lines. And the emission lines in these particular galaxies were slightly peculiar. They were different from the emission lines that are seen in other galaxies. In that, they were not like single Gaussians, but actually had double peaks. Okay, so we were looking at the small sample of double peaked galaxies, and we carried out a VLBI study, and by chance, I think not so much by planning, we spaced these observations from between 4 to 9 years, so like almost a decade, half a decade to a decade. And then, so I just wanted to present some of those results. So what we found very unexpectedly, that even though these are very, very radio weak AGN, they are radio quiet AGN, they don't have much radio emission. And VLBI typically when they observe radio quiet AGN, they don't detect much emission on these small scales. The main reason is that VLBI, because your telescopes are so far apart from each other, you have all these missing spaces. So basically, because of that, you are not sensitive. You don't pick up a lot of dim or diffuse emission. So that is a problem with VLBI. But what we found interesting was that we were able to see what looked like jets on these small scales. So that was the main result. So for example, this one is one of our target galaxies. It's a spiral galaxy. You can see in the red blue color. And this green contour is the radio emission from this galaxy before we did VLBI. So when you look at the radio emission, you don't see anything. You just see a point source. It's a point source. But when you look at this galaxy with VLBI, you start seeing what look like core and jets. So these are jet structures. And so now, so many years later, we have another image of the same. And what was heartening was that these so-called core jet structures remain. Because initially there was some suspicion that maybe we have kind of gone very close, low in the noise, and we are picking up some noise features. But actually, these kind of features remain after 4 or 5 to 10 years. And then some of them actually show this curvature, which also continues to remain. So those were already very interesting results. Okay, so the next thing we did, which I think for you, I don't know if you were able to appreciate this, but this was a very, very interesting result, is that a higher resolution arcsecond scale observations with a very large array, the radio telescope, that point source that I showed you in the previous slide, seems to get resolved a little bit. You start seeing some extensions and it may be a little bit of extension, maybe we can call it a lobe, we're not sure yet. But what was interesting was that this image is the same image here, and the color here is a spectral index, radio spectral index, and there is some kind of gradients which are observed in the spectral index, and the VLBI jet direction seems to be in the same direction. So we found this for the 4 galaxies we looked at. We always found this to be the case. So even though this emission is on scales of a few kiloparsec, and the jets that we detected were on parsec scales, there seems to be some connection between the small scale and the large scale. So that was another very good evidence in support of these jets being dominant in these galaxies, even though they are supposed to be radio quiet. And a lot of astronomers have said that you can't produce radio quiet, jets in radio quiet AGN. So that was another interesting result. But the most exciting thing happened in just 2 galaxies from our sample was that so this is one galaxy. This again is a core jet structure in 2 different epochs. And we found that this jet component seemed to be moving at superluminal speeds. So superluminal speed means that the velocity of that jet component seemed to be faster than the speed of light. Okay, so this is an effect which happens when you have a fast jet at small viewing angles, and it kind of gives the impression that something is moving faster than speed of light. And this has so far been observed only in those AGN which have these very large jets. So this is the first time we are finding this kind of superluminal motion in a radio quiet object. And so we found it not only in one source, we found it in a second source. Of course, the errors were very large in these very, very weak AGN. Recently, there has been some other observations. People are starting to find fast jets in other CFER galaxies as well. So the next thing I wanted to mention was this work that my PhD student Shalmoli Ghosh has been carrying out. And so now this is on polarization. So this is radio polarization. And that's because all the radio emission that you see, synchrotron emission, is highly linearly polarized. Right, so you can actually polarization observations will detect all this radio emission, and this panel is kind of showing one of those CFER galaxies. You see, it's like a S0 kind of galaxy. It's almost face on, and the green contours are the radio emission. So the thing to note here is, of course, here you see very clear what you call jets. What you maybe similar to what you saw maybe in Hercules A. Only thing to remember is that it's a very field which is kind of transfers to the outflow. So this is a standard signature of a hotspot in a radio galaxy, where shocks then kind of compress the magnetic fields and give you this B field structure, magnetic field structure, transfers to the jet direction. So we are seeing all these signatures in CFER galaxies, which is normally not seen. This is what you see in radio loud, radio powerful AGN, where the shocks are very, very strong. But we are seeing this in CFER galaxies where the jets are very tiny. So the jets seem to still be powerful, They exist and they're powerful even in these small galaxies. So this is kind of, bringing us back to the question of why radio loud, why radio quiet. So obviously, there are answers in this. So this is, and the reason for the flattening of the spectral index means that this shocked region is also now re-energizing the particles. And so that is the reason why the spectrum is flat, because when you let electrons age, the spectrum steepens. So when the flat spectral index means that the particles are getting re-accelerated in the shocks. Okay, so this is happening on in these outflows. So very, very interestingly, what we also found for this particular galaxy, this is NGC 3516. When we look at now, the color that you see is the rotation measure. So rotation measure, as you're all aware, is basically an integrand of the electron density and the line of sight magnetic field, as well as the path length through which polarized emission travels, polarized light travels. And so the color here is the rotation measure, which is the units are, sorry, the numbers are here and the units is radians per meter square. So what Sharmoli found was that there are gradients in this rotation measure. And so she's plotted the rotation measure as slices, the blue slices here and the red slices in the counter jet side. And you see this exact, first of all, you see a gradient and you see the exact opposite sense gradient in the counter jet. So this is actually very, very exciting because it's almost suggesting that there is some kind of a helical magnetic field. And this gradient is because so basically the electron density is staying, more or less constant across this jet, but the change in the line of sight B field is giving rise to this rotation measure gradient. Okay, so it's telling you a little bit about the structure of the B field itself. And so we suggested that there could be the presence of a helical B field, magnetic field in this particular AGN, and such fields have been found in a couple of radio loud AGN on VLBI scales. This last result I want to show is a famous Seaford galaxy called NGC 4151. And so this is the same source at two different resolutions. And again, the red ticks are just the polarization vectors. And you can see there's a lot of red ticks here. There are a lot of changes in the electric vectors, which is telling you something about the magnetic field topology. And let me just show you how, if I actually rotated the vectors by 90 degrees, which is what the inferred magnetic field direction is, how the magnetic field direction looks like. So this is the lower resolution image. And what you see immediately, that in this east-west direction, the B fields are maybe aligned with the flow. But in a perpendicular direction, there seems to be some region where the B fields are perpendicular to the flow. So this was very exciting because such structures have actually been predicted and proposed in theory and based on X-ray observations, but never in radio polarization. So this is work by Mehdipur and Costantini, where they suggested that so this is the accretion disk black hole jet, and this may be some kind of a wide outflow like a wind. And this wide outflow has a toroidal magnetic field, and this collimated jet has a poloidal magnetic field. So this was kind of in keeping with that idea. So that was very exciting. And when you look at the higher resolution image, what we see is that outflow that we saw now gets even, is divided into even more components. So there is a magnetic field transverse inner spine and a magnetic field aligned outer sheath, which is observed in this particular Seaford galaxy. And such structures again has been actually observed in radio loud AGN. So this is a image of a radio loud galaxy, NGC 315, where the white ticks are the polarization vectors. And again, you see a spine and a sheath. So the moment you see this, first of all, it's telling you the jet is a dominant feature even in radio quiet AGN. The jet has a well-defined magnetic field structure. Okay, so that is quite exciting. And I just want to present this last result, which is when we tried, Sharmoli tried to see how this object, NGC 4151, the one I showed in the previous slide, how it compares to, for example, other radio loud AGN. So this work, Mehdipur and Constantini had done this plot. It's a famous plot where they have plotted the radio loudness parameter, which I mentioned, which is like the ratio of the radio flux density to optical flux density, and the neutral hydrogen column density, which is some kind of a proxy for the ionized wind. and they had found an anti-correlation for radio-loud objects. And you see how NGC 4151 actually falls on that correlation as well. So this is also very exciting. And so the picture that Sharmoli has come up with is this, that you have a accretion disk, black hole. You have this outflow, which may also have further divisions like a spine and a sheath. But then you have a wider outflow like this, which has this toroidal field around it, which is the wind. Okay, so to summarize the science part of this talk is that the VLBI of radio quiet AGN, they reveal these core jet structures, which are typically VLBI observations have only so far seen in radio loud AGN. And the reason why we are finding them here is because VLBI has not been done so far for radio quiet AGN because the sensitivity was lacking. So it's only now in the recent years that our VLBI arrays have become sensitive enough to pick up, less emission from radio quiet AGN also. So now we are seeing these results. We are finding that some of these jets are curved. Sometimes the curvature stays, but sometimes the jet seems to even change its direction on parsec scales. And there is also relativistic motion in the jets. This was a very intriguing result for me, was that VLA observations or arcsecond scale observations, wherever they show a gradient in the alpha is also where the VLBI jet direction is pointing. So this is saying that even those jets that we see are parsec scale and the VLA observations are kiloparsec scale, somehow there's a connection, and it also tells you at what point the jets are losing collimation in some sense. So the jets are collimated to 100 parsec, but somehow at a few kiloparsec, they're not. So this also tells you something is happening on those scales. Radio polarization, of course, is revealing very interesting magnetic field structures. Some stratification is observed, and helical B fields, magnetic fields are being suggested. So overall, even though our sample is actually very small, the overall summary is that even the radio quiet weak AGN can harbor jets that kind of have similar properties to radio loud AGN. Okay, so now I'll just come to, my time is over, but I'll just come to this very last one or two slides actually. So this is a web page I wanted to share called Working Group for Gender Equity, which I think many of you are aware of this, know of its existence. But this year is important because this is 10 years since its constitution. And so I just, historically, I wanted to give you a sense of how it came about. So 2013, we had, some astronomers had kind of had a first informal session talking about how gender equity is an issue in astronomy. And this was in Trivandrum, there was a meeting that was held. But the first formal session where we actually discussed this was in 2014 in Mohali, ASI. Then in ASI in 2015 in NCRA, after that we wrote up a proposal and proposed to the ASI president that we should constitute a WGGE because of these very low fraction of women in astronomy, which I wanted to share in the next slide. So it's now 10 years since then, and WGG has done many, they have been involved in many activities, which include holding sessions in the ASI meetings and organizing Anna Mani lectures, and other activities. They try to make sure that there is childcare provided at ASI meetings and things like that. But we also do one very important thing is to monitor the gender fractions in research institutes, because for that, for us, that has been easy because the data were easily available. But we want to do this for universities, ICERs, IITs everywhere. So you can definitely go to our WGG page to look at these numbers. So this is the year, and these are the numbers. Total number of faculty who are women, and then the ratio. Then this is the student number. This is the postdoc number. And so we have this for several institutes. So 8 astronomy institutes, and on average, I did this this calculation in 2022, so needs a little bit of updating. But the average fraction of women faculty in astro institutes is only around 15%, whereas the average number of women PhD students around 24%. The number of women postdocs is actually it's really affected by small number statistics. There are very few postdocs, but that is around 30%. So in general, the fraction of women faculty is typically half of the fraction of women PhD students, and this is the well-known leaky pipeline. So I want to end here by mentioning that Piyali Chatterjee, who is the chair of our session, is the current chair of WGGE, and Aru Beri is the co-chair, who are also here. Shushan Konar was the first chair of WGGE. She's also here. She's the next speaker. And Prajwal Shastri is around, and as well as Mayuri Rao. And then Geeta Chadda and Nandita Jairaj are two Anamani lecturers, and Geeta is also here today, and Nandita will be around tomorrow. So I'll just leave this here, and I'll stop my talk now.
Okay, thank you, Preeti, for a very nice talk. And we can have maybe one or two quick questions.
Yeah, nice talk. So the current set of GRMHE simulations have, worried a lot about, jet efficiencies and so on. So I was wondering, of course, for jet efficiency, you need the spin of the black hole and apart from the magnetic field values and so on. And of course, you do have mass accretion rates. So I was just wondering, what are your thoughts on that?
Sure. So I think we actually don't have most of those numbers. So spin is very difficult for us to get. I mean, there have been observations from the iron K alpha line around black holes, but that has been very, very controversial. So we don't have spins. We don't have magnetic field strengths for the jets. So we assume some kind of an equipartition and try to estimate magnetic field strength. We don't have that. Recently there has been some work people are trying to obtain VLBI core shift effect and magnetic fields through that, but it's like for a handful, like one or two sources. We don't have what is the third thing? Mass accretion rates. We don't actually have that as well. So, so most of these, so those are Eddington ratios, and so that's some kind of a proxy for kind of an accretion rate, but we don't have most of these numbers. So these are still, at the realm of, we want to get them, and I think astronomers are getting them for individual sources, but still there are a lot of controversy about the results themselves.
Yeah. Nice talk, Preeti. I had a question regarding the synergies between radio observations and X-ray observations. You mentioned about the winds and XMM Newton perhaps has.
Yes.
So if we have X-ray observations, in addition to the radio observations, how we can enhance our understanding about these objects, and specifically when you are discovering some radio outflows.
Exactly. No, so we have come to, I think everybody knows this, that without X-ray observations, you cannot actually get all the numbers that you want. So you have to use radio observations, radio and X-ray observations to kind of get something interesting. So just with the radio, it's not possible. So we had to finally go back and get we had to get the electron densities, we had to get the warm absorber masses, we had to get the column density from X-ray observations. Without that, we can't really get any.
So do you want it like simultaneously, like it has to be strictly?
So if you're trying to get numbers from the VLBI thing, you would want to do simultaneously. Yes.
Thanks.
Yes.
Yes. Thanks, Preeti. So the VLBI picture images you showed there was something like a jet.
Yes.
Was it, were they like apples to apples, but just few years apart, like same frequency range, same...
Same frequency range, same everything. Everything's the same, except...
like it's just me, maybe you can chat later. Is the jet moving?
So that's a very, very good question. So, the problem is that most of these features are so at the noise level, first of all, they're not compact. So we are not, so this has been a problem for even, blazars, that you can't identify individual components motion. So for a radio quiet agent, it becomes even more difficult. So that's the problem, we can't say. So we have to continue monitoring for many years before we can say that.
Okay, Preeti, I have a question, but I'll catch you later in the interest of time.
Thank you.
So thank you, Preeti.